Welcome to Threatsafe. This is our podcast to help SMEs and SMBs and the people who manage IT within those businesses or responsible for IT to get the very best from the technology that they deploy and then also to manage their cyber security. Let's listen to this week's podcast. Hello everybody, welcome to episode 14 of Threatsafe. I'm Martin Roberts, Managing Director of Neuways.
And I'm Toby Stevenson, Chief Technology Officer at Neuways.
Toby, Threatsafe is an expanded portfolio of things to worry about.
Yeah.
And not just cybersecurity, which we should worry about an awful lot.
Of course.
Okay. We're covering this wider subjects for SMEs and the people who run IT and responsible for IT for SMEs, but not necessarily execute it. What I thought we should talk about this week at this time is what happens in a lot of businesses that are growing and they get talented people in there who produce really complex spreadsheets, or they do a little bit of programming. They used to do something with Access, Microsoft Access, a bit of database stuff, and they produce programs. And these systems suddenly become the cornerstone of the business, a key part of the offering. And whilst they are superb in serving the business, they also produce a huge threat to business.
They do, yes. Actually, this is something I've seen with some customers before. Heavy reliance on these homegrown, self-built solutions that, as you rightly say, were created by somebody with all the best of intents and to satisfy a particular need. But in this particular example, they were still being used 10 years later, 5 years after that person had left the business. So they're almost like a black box solution. Nobody really understood how they work because they were written by a talented but enthusiastic amateur, and didn't follow documentation or commenting standards. So there was lots and lots of code, BB code and SQL code and things like that in these spreadsheets, and it's really hard to unpick.
It is, and I'm going back to basics actually. Firstly, often, and I'm going to put my hand up here, Toby, because I started doing this exactly when I first started messing around with computers, and I worked for a company who were kind enough to put me in a back room. I think it was a good idea to do something, and I produced a database. And we put all the stock in there, and I was quite pleased actually, seeing I was a complete amateur, and I was a complete amateur. I was learning on the hoof.
Learning by doing.
Even actually before the advent of the internet. So I was getting books out and going to the library, and I wrote this quite a complex system. And then they made me redundant, not realizing what I'd done. And 3 months later, I was back there doing contract work, and actually the rest started from here. Actually, from that point onwards. But I did things wrong. I used software which was potentially not licensed correctly because I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't know where it was going, because when you're building these things, you're saying, well, I'll try this out. Did I document it well? No, it's mostly in my head. I tried to comment things in the code, and I'm being very grand when I say code. That's not real. It wasn't real coding. But the thing about this is that I often, when we're talking to customers these days, or people come to us and say, we've got this problem. And actually, we had one only last week where somebody's built a really brilliant customer-facing product where customers from around the world come onto this thing, they do a configuration, it checks things for them, and it checks the legality of certain setups for them. I won't talk about a particular customer, but they don't know it works. And they don't know where half the code is, because the way when you're doing code, sometimes you have something which is the actual code, we can go and see what happens and you can execute it, and then something's called compiled, and it it's something that operates on its own. and won't allow people to modify it.
Yeah, an example of that would be the actual executable file that
Yes.
makes Excel or Outlook run. They are compiled binaries, and behind them there will be hundreds of thousands of lines of code that make those products work.
Okay, so I've seen this many times now, and also as software becomes, I'm going to say, easier to use, and we get AI and all this coming along as well, we're going to get people saying, hey, I want a program that does this. Now, actually, Microsoft has some pretty fantastic products called Power Apps, where you can create various things. It'll populate spreadsheets, it'll do this, it'll have routing in there, it'll have automation. Which means the pool of people who can produce wonderful stuff is about to get bigger.
Yeah, well, they have this term, don't they? They call it low code or no code, and citizen developer.
Yeah. And it's only vaguely frightening, depending where you sit. But the truth is that you've got to manage it. You've got to manage it as a business, because if that person leaves you, or is not very good at what they do in terms of documentation, or makes a mistake, what are you going to do, folks? How are you going to dig it out of the hole if suddenly your business is relying on this and you can't provide that software to your customers tomorrow, which they've been relying on for some time? So what are the things a business can do? What's the approach?
Yeah, and it's really tricky with particularly with tools like this, because on the one hand, they've democratized the tools and made them accessible, but on the other hand, they've taken away a lot of the husbandry that would be associated with building these things. Which, if you're a trained programmer, you've been trained to do these things and you understand the reasons for it. And of themselves, they're not intrinsically dangerous.
No,
I mean, we have cybersecurity concerns to consider, and licensing and things like that.
Yes.
But actually, they tend to get people out of a hole, and they often fill little gaps of functionality. But the big problem, and it's the thing you said at the start of the session, was, what happens if that person leaves? And there's a lot of intrinsic knowledge from the author that they won't, don't document. And how do you fix that? I suppose one thing you could do is you find a third party to create it on your behalf. That way, you're kind of almost like divesting the responsibility of the upkeep to that third party.
Well, the obligation on the third party is manifold. One is to make sure that it's professional, professionally delivered, professionally compiled and written, or written and compiled. My apologies. And that it does the job that it's meant to do. And around that, of course, what you're hopefully buying in that situation is some sort of service level agreement. So so if it does go wrong, or some changes need to be made to it, it's done in a certain time frame that suits you.
Yeah.
Again, if this is a something that's been produced that, and I go back to this company we're helping out at this moment in time, who got into a little bit of a cul-de-sac, in that the people who actually developed this software 5-10 years ago are no longer around. We've got to rebuild the whole thing, and try to actually unpick what it's actually doing, because a lot of it in the code is not documented particularly well, and we'll write it. But our obligation now is to make sure it's in modern code, in a modern environment, that it has an SLA around the support of it if it goes wrong. We've got to make sure that it meets all the standards in terms of licensing and coding, and more importantly these days, as you say, cybersecurity. We have got to make sure that it has some good quality rails and guardrails and security to make sure that it can't be hacked. It can't easily be hacked. It can't have things done to it which may cause problems to people, other users. Today, I suddenly decide I've got a special configurator I need to do, because we're selling a particular product that I've looked in the market. Firstly, you look in the marketplace and say, does something exist that does this already? If you've discounted that, you then say, well, I'm going to build something myself. What you should do today is go to a third party, and it might be your MSP, might be able to provide the services. They should look at, again, this low code, no code, citizen programming stuff. Microsoft Power Apps is brilliant for this. You can do all sorts of things like that. And that way you are saying to them, I have a requirement. They will take you also through a process of developing specification with you, asking what you want. And then finally, they'll deliver a product which you can test, accept, and move forward with. That's what you need to do today. Even if you've got things that have been done historically, which are a little bit older, and the people are still around, actually examine your business now and see whether you should be doing it.
Yeah, I think getting that inventory of all of the software and the system that you use is really, really important. We've spoken previously about software as it goes out of date and what that upgrade life cycle might look like. But the same kind of risks apply to this, this bespoke software, this self-built software piece. You need to understand what they are, what they're doing, and I guess one of the dangers is that you think, well, I'll just sit on it forever because it's working. I'll leave it. We don't need to change it. But of course, the software it's running on may have vulnerabilities.
Yes.
Or if you use a more modern cloud platform, that in itself may change, which renders something no longer working. And you need to understand how to fix those things. And if you are, you've got a solution that was built by somebody 2-3 years ago, they're no longer with the business, and something changes. That's going to be a real problem if it's intrinsic to the business and you don't know how it works and it stops working. Better to try and understand this stuff today and kind of make the plans while everything's going well.
Okay, so I think it's a short one today, folks, but it's getting inventory now. One thing takeaway today: go and do an inventory. What have you got in your business which is unique to you, that only somebody in your business may know about, or somebody who left your business may know about? How are you going to make it safe? Because the threats to your business could be quite considerable.
Well, I mean, these are great additions to any kind of risk register you may be storing. So, go through all that software. All the software that is not packaged software. Absolutely make a note of it and understand who you think in the business is responsible for it and how old it is and any other information you've got, and you can then at least start to unpick which you need to look at first.
Okay, and actually let's take it slightly a step further, which is also there's also spreadsheets in your business which are I know we implement business systems all the time. Microsoft Dynamics 365 Business Central, for instance. And one of the challenges there is taking a customer will say, well, we've got this configurator we use to get pricing for customers. And can you replicate this within Business Central? We'll say, yeah, for sure. What they have as a configurator actually is a very complex spreadsheet with data behind that and feeds behind that, such like. And again, that needs to be if you're not implementing a new business system, if you've got a spreadsheet which is complex and sits there, is it kept in the right place? Is it backed up? Does it have version control on? Do you, when every time you save a change to it, do you just save a copy of it and store the old copy away just in case you need to roll back to it? And also have that inventory of these key spreadsheets and such like, because if you have a problem and it disappeared, how you can recover it. And the other thing I would say, just as an aside, occasionally check the veracity of the spreadsheets and all the calculations within them, because over time they do get mistakes and errors.
Right. Oh, yeah, entirely possible. I mean, I think I would add one onto that, and this is coming back to, like, I think a broader observation, really. But the version of the files themselves. If this was a spreadsheet that was created 10 years ago, and it just works, at some point Excel's not going to want to read that anymore. And then can you easily just save it in the new version, or is a load of stuff going to get lost? Because as the Excel file versions change, certain commands and functions get deprecated and no longer exist. And all of a sudden you could be, in order to keep up to date, you could be introducing a service affecting problem. So again, it's that technical debt, and how do you make sure you minimize that? But if it sounds like a minefield, it potentially can be.
Yeah, well, that's cheered you all up, hasn't it? I tell you, I think everything's going fine. They're not going to talk about cybersecurity this time. We've talked about something else, which is, again, do this inventory. Think about what you've got in your business. Make a list of it, and then decide or take a view as to whether you need to protect those assets, those things that you've got, those programs, those spreadsheets, and that there is somebody close to hand who can actually pick it up if it needs to be picked up in the event of a problem. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for listening and watching. If you have, thank you very much, Toby.
Thank you.
Useful stuff there, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Threatsafe. We hope you found it enjoyable and informative. Please reach out with any comments, feedback, questions, and we look forward to seeing you soon.